Okay, so sorry that it's taking me so long to respond or contribute to the OSL discussion here. I'm going to do a video because I feel like I could do better explaining it this way than trying to type it all out. So hopefully this helps and is useful. Um, I have some examples that I'm going to use and show along the way to help um, show what I'm trying to explain. So OSL is obviously one of those things where there's a ton of different ways to go about doing it. Some people look at it as a much more simple process, and some people look at it as a much more complex process. Um, I think the complexity personally comes from like really starting to dive into how light really interacts with things. So understanding that different colored light will interact differently with different colored objects. Light will act differently with different types of materials. So I think that's where a lot of the real scariness comes from OSL, is just those small differences once you start to get really complex with it. But for keeping it simple and ignoring color and most material interactions, um, really you just want to create a hyper focused sense of contrast to really sell off the OSL effect. Um, so if you were to flick on a lighter in the middle of the day out in the open with no cloud coverage, nothing, no shade or anything, that lighter isn't going to reflect any light onto you because it's so overpowered by the light that's already there, right? So the same thing goes for when you're trying to sell the OSL effect on your miniature. You can't necessarily paint the miniature to the same um, brightness level that you would normally. Um, at least not entirely. There are workarounds for that, but in general, you want to keep things a bit more dark and desaturated than you otherwise normally would have, just because that helps sell the effect better. Um, so, um, sorry, hold on. Sorry, I had to gather my thoughts. Didn't want to just sit there and not say anything for a minute. So, you, you, I seen that you mixed some black into your initial colors to darken it, and that is definitely a way to approach it. Um, I personally wouldn't recommend just mixing straight black into your paints. I know you're working with limited resources, so um, I understand that all of this advice will be applicable to you right now. But something to consider in what you should do is the color that you want to darken, you should first find its complementary color to um, to desaturate it, and that will also darken it a bit. Um, and then from there, once you've desaturated it and you feel you still need the base to be a little bit darker, you can start adding in a little bit of black to further bring it down. But I would desaturate first because it's not. I don't think it's just about just being dark. I think the desaturation also adds to the effect because once you get into the light part, the light is always going to be not only brighter but more saturated. So you're increasing the contrast in two different ways by not only darkening but also desaturating. So so that's something to consider. Um, Also, I didn't watch the video on, so I don't know what Sunny and Cal went over already, but something to consider also is, of course, like light fall off and how quickly light can fall off, you know, depending on your light source. You know, a lantern lit by candlelight is going to have a lot more drastic fall off than, say, a spotlight, you know. So, but here's an example of keeping the colors around her desaturated, and then as you can see, it doesn't go just from skin straight to like bright. There's like a darkening of the skin, and then this isn't finished. This is super rough and like ugly, so don't, you know, don't throw too much on how perfect this looks. It's the theory here that's important. But you know, you have your brighter skin tone, darker skin tone, then this dark line would be called like the terminator line, and that is where you can kind of get away with making this stuff a little bit brighter, and then just having a terminator line there to kind of give you that dark desaturated point for the brightness to kind of contrast next to. So, and then you see from the terminator line, it still jumps into like a darker desaturated version of the actual OSL color, and then gets brighter and brighter as it gets closer to the actual source. But nothing over here gets as bright as the actual lantern. And then it's also important, like if your OSL source has details like this, those things will catch light too. So that's stuff to, you know, little details that will really help sell the effect. And you see up here, like nothing up here is as bright as down here because it's way further from the light source. Light's also directional. It only goes straight. So looking at your light source, I suggest like kind of just moving around the figure and kind of getting an idea of where could this light possibly touch. And it's also one of those things that, you know, there's some room for artistic interpretation. Like you could argue that there shouldn't be any of this up here. This is probably way too bright over here, and it probably goes down the leg a little too much down there. But I want a little bit more attention back here on this. I didn't want that just completely left in the dark. Also, I do feel like it would catch light. Again, maybe not as much as I have, but... And then here, definitely just more of an artistic choice. Like, I do believe that the way this is shaped, whatnot, that there would be some light. Maybe not as much as I have here. Maybe also a little bit more throughout here to, you know, less emphasize boobs. But again, it's a work in progress piece. So, but the practical theory of, you know, darker desaturated, bright boom OSL. Okay. So kind of same thing here. Focus, where you can see like these aren't really like bright colors. Like her hair's brighter than I wanted it to turn out, but again, we have this, you know, blue. We move toward this like terminator line, and then you start to work into the darker of the glow. Move into a lighter. As you get closer, it's even lighter, and then boom. It started down here. I didn't finish it, but so. And also, it's one of those things like some angles will just look better than others, just because, you know, it's stationary 2D or stationary 3D. So some angles might not look as good as others. That also could just be a skill issue for myself. So take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, um, something you could do also, I tend to start from black with my OSL paint jobs, and I will generally do the OSL first because that's the most contrast you're gonna get, right? Like if you've worked your glow, this is one of the first couple lantern glow things I tried doing, and it's kind of trash. But this down here looks decent. But this is the most contrast you're gonna get is your the brightest part of your glow to just straight black. So from there you can kind of like evaluate and judge how how dark you want these other colors to be, and how much separation you want from where you're starting to see these other colors in that Terminator line. So but yeah, I know I throw some people off with doing it this way, because a lot of people feel like you just paint the figure and then paint the glow where you want over it, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's, like I said at the beginning, many ways to do OSL. So this is just what I'm describing now. Most of my OSL projects, I have done something different on them than I've done from the last one. Sometimes in big ways, sometimes in small ways. It's all about experimenting and finding what works for you, what clicks for you, what makes sense for you, and then just evolving that into your own thing. So when I wanted to learn OSL, and make no mistake, OSL is still something I am very much learning still myself. So I don't say any of this as like an expert or anything like that. This is just basically kind of been my journey on OSL and things that I do. So I would recommend, and what I did is I looked for artists, be it on Facebook or Instagram or just through recommendations from other people that were just really known for their OSL, and I followed a bunch of them, and a handful of them I even paid for patrons. And I get it, not everyone is able to do that or wants to do that, and that's fine also. There's a lot of good free material from those same people that they put out for people that can't or don't want to support their patrons. So I would definitely recommend doing that. Also, practice. When I started learning OSL, that's basically all I painted. Like every project I painted had some element of OSL for probably over a year, and even to this day, probably 6 months since that, a majority of my projects still have OSL because it's still something that, like I said, I'm still very much learning myself, and it's something I want to get better at and whatnot. So doing, you can only, you could read all the tutorials and follow all the patrons and watch all the YouTube videos you want, but practice and repetition are what is really gonna drive something clicking. So there's also art books that specifically delve into light interactions and whatnot. So there's a ton of resources out there. I would I could give you more specific recommendations if you would like. So yeah. So I guess TLDR. Or actually, I want to scratch that. So wait, you know what? Pause. Hold on. Okay. So, something else to consider that's kind of more of a complex detail, but also it is kind of a basic part too. Um, Light mixes differently than paint. So, if say you have, you know, uh, purple and green. I don't know what color that would normally make. I don't know. Paint mix is different than light. Light is additive. Paint is subtractive. I believe I might have that backwards. Don't quote me on that, but I believe light is additive and paint is subtractive. Paint is subtractive mixing. Yeah. So if you're gonna do something where like you have like different like light sources crossing, like this green light and these purple lights, you would think that it would make something different, but in paint it would make something different. Like if you just mixed that color and that color in your palette, you would not get blue. But if you take a green light and that colored light and shine them on something and have them cross over, you will get a really pretty blue. And since it's additive, it should actually be a pretty saturated mix too. Whereas traditionally when you mix paint pigments, every pigment you mix in will desaturate a little bit more. So something else to consider. Again, a bit more of an advanced thing, but also I feel like there's lots of stuff that can have multiple light sources pretty easily, so it's something to consider. So I guess also could talk about how subtlety can be good, and like, so that's not a very subtle glow. That doesn't really look like it's coming from a lantern. It looks like it's coming from a huge TV screen or something. So does it look kind of glowy? Yeah, but does it look like it's glowing from that? No. So something like this, where the crystal is just this ever so subtle glow, and it's like, it's nothing that's not what's grabbing your attention from across the room, but arguably that is a much better looking glow, and that's probably due to the more subtle and restraint I had with it. But sometimes restraint is not fun. You could also emulate OSL without actually the glowing color, but just like this is giving off the light, and this is why you can see these colors. But as you move away from the light, the colors start to desaturate and darken. Once you get back here where there is no light, but as you turn around, you're in the light. So that's another way you can kind of suggest OSL without doing an overtly, this color is blasting. I did do like a bit of a yellow mix into all these colors to kind of bring it to a homogeneous warmth to it. So that's something to consider. But okay, that's all the time I got before work. I hope I answered some questions. I hope what I said makes sense. Sorry again it took so long. Sorry this is so long, but hopefully it helps. Let me know.